Okay.
Good afternoon. We're going to call the May 4th Board of Adjustment to order. First, let me do roll call, starting with Mr. Davis.
Here.
Mr. Coleman. Absent. Mr. Golden.
Here.
Mr. Metcalf.
I'm here virtually.
Mr. Melling.
Here.
Mr. Burrows.
Here.
And I'm William Guess. We have 6 members present virtually. That constitutes a quorum. Takes 5 to affirm a motion, either in favor or in opposition to a variance request. And because this is a little different format than usual, I have some things to read for the group and those that are observing. This is the meeting of the City of Mobile's Board of Adjustment for Monday, May 4th, 2020. General procedures for this remote meeting are as follows. Staff will admit the applicant and concerned parties associated with an application to the meeting. Once these parties have joined the meeting, the chair will announce the beginning of the public hearing. Will reiterate the board's following rules. Each application is limited to a maximum of 4 speakers for an application and a maximum of 4 speakers in opposition to an application. Said speakers, regardless of being in support or opposition, are limited to a maximum of 5 minutes with 1 minute warning provided after 4-minute time period. Once all speakers are heard in support or in opposition in this order, once again, in support and then in opposition in this order, the applicant is allowed a maximum of 2 minutes to review. In order to allow the meeting to progress and to ensure that the meeting can be heard by all watching and properly recorded, the chair may direct the meeting host to mute the microphones of attendees not addressing the board. The applicant will present their application in conformance with the board's rules as outlined above. The board will ask questions if necessary, and the opposition will then be allowed to present their concerns in conformance with the board's rules as outlined above. The board will ask questions. The applicant will be provided a 2-minute time period to respond. Once the board concludes their questions of the applicant and interested parties, the chairman will declare the public hearing closed and the board will go into deliberation session. At this point, all meeting participants, except for the board and staff members speaking for the record, will have their microphones on mute. Once the board has a motion, a second, and has rendered a decision, the applicant concerned parties will leave the meeting or will be sent back to the waiting room by staff. Staff will then admit the applicant and opposed parties for the next application. And then, do I need to read the next part, Margaret?
I don't remember what it said.
It talks about admission to the board's web portal. The applicants will, for these items, have been confirmed via email and agreement staff recommendations.
Gotcha.
Okay.
We can just take that. Tell you after we do the adoption of the agenda.
Okay. The agenda has been presented to the board members for consideration. Chair will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's do it one by one, I think is a requirement, right? Or can you do it based on voice for everyone, Margaret?
I would say unless there is a question as to whether or not, if you have a split vote, I think when it's unanimous, there's no need for a roll call.
Okay. All right. Well, we had unanimous approval of the agenda as provided. All right. We'll go to the first application, which is 6315. This is 257 North Jackson Street.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, as we discussed, this application, and we have some others on the agenda as well, and I will take them as speak up as they occur. And this particular application, the applicant was in agreement with the staff recommendation. However, and he was in agreement with the split recommendation. He will be revising the driveway to comply with standards. We received no opposition or concerns from the neighborhood, from anyone via the web portal or email. So this is one where the board should ask the staff if they have any questions, and then you can proceed with your vote.
Okay, well, first of all, does anyone on the board have any questions? Okay. The applicant has agreed to staff recommendations, and as Margaret has stated, they have modified the drive to address the concern. Any questions of the staff? All right, Chair entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Application 6316, 3568 Higgins Road. My understanding, this is the same.
Yes, sir.
They have accepted staff's recommendations and conditions. Any questions of the staff? All right, Chair, entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, we're on application 63.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, may I confirm who made the motion and the second?
Jeremy made the motion. Lewis seconded it, I believe.
Thank you.
John Bulls made a second, but somebody else did too.
Okay.
All right, thank you both. All right, we're on application 6317. This is 1500 Government Street. And Margaret, if you'll allow all those concerned parties into the meeting.
I will admit them and let you know when everybody has been admitted.
And who is the name of the individual representing the applicant?
It is Casey Pipes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I have admitted Casey Pipes, who is the applicant, as well as Brenda Bolton and Anna Bush, who are both speaking in support. I have also admitted Nathan Friedlander, who is here in opposition. I think before I start the PowerPoint and before they begin, we need to make sure that everyone can hear and be heard. Mr. Pipes?
Thank you.
Okay, again, I'm sorry.
I'm here. Thank you.
All right, Brenda Bolton?
I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have video though. I don't have my video. Is that normal?
That's fine, Ms. Bolton.
Okay.
Anna Bush? Okay, I can see her, but I cannot hear her. Mr. Friedlander?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure what's going on with Miss Bush. I don't see. where she's called in via another method. I will keep an eye on that, and if I'm able to readmit her, I will.
Okay, can we proceed with the application?
Yes, let me pull up the screen share for the PowerPoint, and you probably will want to go over the rules.
Okay. All right, good afternoon. General procedures for this remote meeting are as follows. The staff is admitting the applicant and concerned parties associated with the application to the meeting. Once everyone has joined, we'll begin the public hearing aspect of this application. Each application is limited to a maximum of 4 speakers for an application, a maximum of 4 speakers in opposition to an application. Said regardless of being in support or opposition are limited to a maximum of 5 minutes, with a 1-minute warning provided after a 4-minute time period. Once all the speakers are heard in support or in opposition, in that order, the applicant is allowed a maximum of a 2-minute response. In order to allow the meeting progress and ensure the meeting can be heard by all watching and properly recorded, the chair will direct the meeting host to mute the microphones of attendees not addressing the board. The applicant will present their application in conformance with the board's rules outlined above. The board will ask questions. Opposition will then be allowed to present their concerns in conformance with the board's rules as outlined above. The board will have the opportunity to ask questions. The applicant will then respond with All right, and once the board concludes their questions of the applicant and interested parties, the chairman will declare the public hearing closed. The board will go into deliberation session. At this point, all meeting participants, except for board and staff members speaking for the record, will have the microphones on mute. Once the board has made a decision, or a motion, I should say, and a second has been rendered a decision, the applicant and concerned parties will leave the meeting and will be sent back to the waiting room. All right, and then staff will then admit applicants to the opposed parties for the next application. All right, can we proceed now? Mr. Kate.
Before Mr. Pipes begins, I do need to let the board know that we received comments which were forwarded to you. We had Mr. Friedlander in opposition. We had comments of support from Teresa Tessner, Anna Bush, Benjamin Bates, and then you had comments forwarded to you today, which included a joint position statement of support from the Government Street Collaborative, the Linecoff Historic District Neighborhood Organization, the Dexter Street Porch Society, Old Dolphin Way, and Church Street East. So we're ready to begin the presentation.
Okay, Mr. Pipes, will you tell us the nature of your application and why the board should consider the variance?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is the commercial shopping center, at Government and Catherine Street that houses the Office Depot and Dollar Tree is the bigger, areas, but it's a multi-tenant structure, and the immediate request is to allow a use variance in this existing structure to allow a state ABC store. This is there's no additional construction planned. It's just to take over some existing suites, suite C and D, which are kind of in the middle of the multi-tenant structure, which have been vacant for some time, for about 3 years now. So the request is to allow a state ABC store, liquor store in an LB2 district. The issue here, and the reason why this is coming to y'all, to your board as a variance request, is this has been a highly negotiated piece of property since it was converted from a hotel some time ago. And it was designed, and the structure is really sort of a B2-esque structure, but because of the negotiated zoning that went with it when it was being approved with the neighborhood and the neighbors and the city, it was zoned LB2. And it's in keeping with that history of being a highly negotiated structure. When we made this request initially to the Planning Commission to rezone the property to allow for this use, because there's obviously a prospective tenant that wants the use, the neighborhood representatives that we met with very much preferred that we go about doing this in this manner as a variance instead of as a rezoning. And we're happy to do that, and that's why we're here. This is, again, I think an example of the applicant and the neighborhood groups getting together, trying to work out as much as they can. And the product of that communication and engagement has been to bring this request to your commission, Mr. Chairman. This is the variance issue is for y'all to decide, is that granting the variance is not contrary to the public interest and that special conditions exist. We think from the sheer weight of support we have from the neighborhood organization that granting the variance is not going to be contrary to the public interest. Everybody that I've talked with and that I've interacted with wants this shopping center to be somewhat of a success, certainly more successful than it's currently been. And right now, it's really in danger of turning into a negative blight on the community. We had in 2019, Office Depot gave notice of non-renewal. When we couldn't fill that space, we had to, the owner had to renegotiate with Office Depot to reduce the rent to keep them there. Rents have been going down for the other tenants. 3 spaces have been vacant in this shopping center for over 3 years. There's a real danger of this shopping center becoming a blight on the area, which is not in anyone's best interest.
1 minute.
Thank you. The special conditions are that we've got this structure that even the city's comprehensive plan calls for to be zoned similar to all of the B2 property that surrounds it. It's really a B2 site, but with LB2 uses, and it's choking off the viability of it, and it's going to lead to a situation where the property goes into a slow decline if it's not able to put in a quality tenant. And the State ABC store is a quality tenant. It's a reliable tenant. It's not a nuisance creating type tenant. And we would really appreciate the board's consideration of this. We view it as a constructive use of a variance to allow the applicant in the neighborhood to accomplish this without putting the State ABC board property, the State ABC store, right on the frontage of Government Street, where they could go by right in the existing B2. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of the board for the applicant? Okay, Margaret, do we have anyone that's in favor of the opposition that's in the meeting?
Yes, Ms. Bolton is next to speak.
Ms. Bolton?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you have video at your end of the speakers? I'm just curious.
Some.
Okay. I'm Brenda Bolton. I live in Flo Claire, which is almost across the street from this development. And I'm the convener and spokesperson for the Government Street Collaborative Community Action Group. In this particular case, we had a number of historic districts and neighborhood associations that joined our position paper. And I think Ms. Pappas has already named those, so I won't repeat them. But it was a good number. And the only reason that Oakley did not join, by the way, is that one of their officers was conflicted because of his professional role. So We did have Oakley residents in the community meetings that did agree to this position, but the board chose not to take a vote because of that conflict. First I want to repeat what Mr. Pike said and point out that it was actually the owner and the realtor and the ABC folks who initiated contact with us. That may have been suggested to them by planning, but we appreciated it, and I think it led to a productive meeting. We had quite a few people who attended. It was a good, positive meeting. We asked a lot of questions and expressed a lot of concerns, and they addressed them. So now you may ask why, obviously this is the kind of development that can be contentious in a neighborhood, and the state people sort of made it clear that they weren't interested in getting in the middle of a neighborhood squabble. So you may wonder why we ultimately said we would accept a variance. Of course, the most obvious thing is that we don't want upzoning there on so large a parcel, which is right across the street from the other huge corner parcel of about 4 or 5 acres. And even though there is a good bit of B2 across the street from this development, all of that white that you're looking at that surrounds the northeast and west side is residential. So it's very much a mixed area. And if you count actual parcels, the number of R1 and R3 parcels nearby and touching the property does outnumber the number of B2 developments. So we looked at all that, and we came to some conclusions. The first most obvious conclusion beyond the zoning issue was that this center is beginning to look like it's struggling to remain viable. And we looked at what that might mean for so large a parcel in our midst. And then, we dealt very, upfront with the reality that small retail is suffering across this whole country, and retail centers everywhere are having to look for alternative tenancy. So we know that alternative tenancy is an answer in this struggling retail landscape. And there are a lot of other things that we thought could be put in there as an alternative that would be even less desirable. We appreciate that the developer has written into his application that this variance would be only for a state-owned and operated alcohol sales store, not private. That was one of the concerns the neighborhood had. So in realizing that we need stable tenancy in that center as well as the owner, we decided that this was a good compromise, and so we decided to support the variance. And I'll just throw in there, we are right now in the middle of what we don't even know the economic crisis we're facing yet. So this may add even more urgency to the matter of getting some stable tenancy into that area. And it's my understanding from the state reps who met with us that this would be a 10-year lease. So that would give a long-term stable tenant that could give the owner and the community time to work together to improve that center. So it's in the public interest. That's the short story on that whole part. In terms of a hardship, anything that's business oriented, you could say is ultimately economic. But in this case, we're convinced that this is a community hardship issue. If we can't work with this owner, if this owner can't work with us to improve and stabilize this property, then the person who will be hurt the most, the persons who will be hurt the most are the residents that surround the property. So it's a community hardship issue in our view. And I think it would very much undermine the progress we've made in establishing a good working relationship. When two parties can't work together, improvements just can't occur. And that would do a disservice to both sides in this case, and the public interest would not be served in that case. Now that, there is some precedent, and it was interesting to me that in reading the letter of opposition, that the letter concluded by pointing out the successful Stokely Garden Express across the street, which I'll point out to the board was achieved by just such a variance as this, because they could not have opened without greenhouses, which they needed a variance for. And you could easily say, well, that was an economic interest. I mean, everything business related comes down to dollars eventually. But we supported that. We came to the board, we worked with Strope, and that's a very successful operation. So I think that's a good example of what can happen in situations like this when both parties are willing to approach a project in a positive way.
Ms. Bolton, I appreciate your comments. We've expired on time. Can you stay for a second and see if there's anyone on the board that has any questions? Any of the board members have any questions for Ms. Bolton? Ms. Bolton. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Pappas, do we have anyone else in the meeting in favor of the application before we go to opposition?
She's logged in. Her name is Anna Bush. Ms. Bush, can you hear us?
I'm here.
Awesome.
Yes, I can hear you. Let me make sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
ma'am.
Can you hear me? I'm not sure if I'm using my phone or my computer, to be honest. I had to do both.
Your audio is very good, and we got video. Thank you.
Okay, great. Lovely. Yeah, I think Brenda actually Ms. Bolton covered most of what I was going to say. I live on 21 Bienville Avenue, 36606. I'm just a little further west of all of this, but that is my main shopping stomping ground area. I, like most of the residents, was not thrilled to see the center go in, but now that it's there, we certainly don't want to see it become a shell. This obviously is a great tenant for that place. A lot of the people in the neighborhood, I think, do their shopping for medicinal purposes at the Ashland Place area liquor store. This would be a lot more convenient. I personally don't care for the one on Broad Street, and I understand that's the one that's closing. So this would be a win for me, certainly to the extent that I would need those products. The ABC stores with their reasonable hours of operation are.
Audio.
I'm sorry? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Let me turn it off. Back on. Okay. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Well,
Ms. Pappas, we lost Ms. Bush.
I can hear.
Yeah, I can still hear you guys.
I think somebody's talking in the background is what it sounds like. Not of you, Ms. Bush, but somebody that's on this call.
Oh, maybe so. Let me just make sure my phone is not interfering.
Now we can't hear you.
Okay, so you must be hearing me through my phone. Crazy. I just wanted to say that, we don't want it to go dark. We want the reasonable hours that the store offers, the adult traffic rather than, teenager attracting sort of amenity. And that the ABC obviously not being interested in getting into the dispute in the neighborhood, just kind of the whole cooperative spirit that has come about makes me very much in favor of this as opposed to an upzoning of the whole parcel. And I think that's all I had to say.
Okay. Any questions of the board for Ms. Bush? All right. Ms. Pappas, anyone else in the meeting that's in favor of the application before we go to those in opposition?
No one further registered for support.
Okay. In opposition, I think it was Mr. Friedlander.
Yes, thank you. I hope
Your
you hear me.
address, please. I'm sorry.
I said, yes, thank you. I hope you can all hear me okay. And I don't seem to be on the video. I'm sorry about that. From the comments that have been made and the language in the application, this clearly appears to be a case of seeking rezoning for economic hardship. While I can sympathize with the developer for wanting to bring a money-paying tenant into the property, economic hardship is not a justification for rezoning. And the B, in essence, what the developer is seeking is a B3 rezoning rather than LB2, which is not consistent with a traditional quarter land use. It's inconsistent with the promises that the developer originally made to provide high-end retail in the development. If it were not for those promises of high-end retail, it's likely that there would have been opposition at the beginning from all of the different neighborhood associations that are now joining in support, and they've indicated as much in their comments. One of our greatest concerns is, besides the economic hardship issue, is where is the traffic going to come from that's going to bring customers to the shopping center? If you were to do a Google search of liquor stores or ABC liquor stores, and then look at the locations that you find on a map, you would see that the Ashland Place liquor store is obviously going to get most of the business that comes from the west of this development further. With the elimination of the Broad Street liquor store, which is served by major quarters of Dolphin Street and Broad Street, there's no other liquor store that appears on a map in that Google search other than to funnel traffic from the north, from the northeast, from the south and southeast, which brings lots of traffic through residential neighborhoods, and particularly down narrow streets such as Catherine Street, possibly through some of these other residential neighborhoods, that Lafayette Street. Those two corridors in particular go right past McGill-Toolen School. And we're very concerned that there's no traffic study that's been involved as to where the traffic's going to come to the location, and the public safety risk that's posed by that traffic going down those narrow streets, particularly when the type to be attracted to a liquor store, the obviously alcohol use, and could possibly have some safety issues. That those are the primary basis of our opposition.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Got a question for Nathan. Nathan, you say we. Who is we? And then two, what is are you a stakeholder? What, do you live in the area or what?
I'm a private attorney, and I've been retained to make an opposition to the application, and I'm not at liberty to disclose any more than that.
Was that okay? Was that made clear to the board? I thought you were in opposition as an independent citizen. So I didn't know, but thanks for clearing that up.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Friedlander? All right. Thank you. Ms. Pappas, is there anyone else in the waiting room or in the meeting, I should say, that's in opposition?
No, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Pipes, do you have anything to say in response?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were not required or to provide a traffic study. It's my understanding it wasn't needed by the city because there's no expansion of the facility. It's just a change out of a tenant issue. The issue that relates that Mr. Friedlander raised about economic hardship, we don't have to prove that there's no existing use in order to get a variance for a use variance. All we have to show is that it's not detrimental to the public interest. It promotes the public interest, and that there's a special situation that exists. And that's what we have here. We have one of the more highly negotiated zoning issues when this was converted from a hotel, and you essentially have a B2 structure, multi-tenant shopping center with an LB2 use designation. And that was all to accommodate concerns of neighbors and neighborhood organizations at the time. And that's the situation that we have, whether it's right or wrong or good or bad. But the reality now is we are having substantial trouble filling the space. We are having substantial trouble keeping it up to the standards that everybody would like for it to be maintained to. And here we are faced with a very good credit tenant that wants to come in with the neighborhood support behind it, with the owner ready to go. And it was a great idea before the pandemic. It's certainly as good, if not better of an idea now in light of what's going on with retail around the city and broader. This is a community level issue that we think can be a constructive use of a variance by this board, and the staff has not recommended against it. And I would ask y'all all to vote in favor.
Mr. Pipes, I have a question.
Yes.
And this appears to be a hardship to me, and that's why I've given this some consideration. The placement of the actual facility is very far back on the property. Was that a condition with the community when it was first developed?
I was not involved in it when it was first developed. I know the location of the structure and the wall separating it from residential properties was very much an issue. The setback off of Government Street, Mr. Chairman, I just don't recall. The issue we like about the setback for the liquor store use in particular is it gets it off the frontage along the B2 properties on Government Street where it could otherwise locate by right, and puts it back in a shopping center instead of right up on the side of the road like some of the other liquor stores are.
Well, no, my point, the reason why I've seen this property developed over time is that you can almost drive by this shopping center without even seeing it because of the placement. And that's the reason why I asked if that's been a hardship for the owner.
You're right. It's not an impulse stop because of its lack of visibility, to the motoring traffic. It's really got to be a destination type tenant, and so that further limits what would otherwise be available in an LB2 district. I think most of those uses are some of them fall under the category of impulse stops and some are more destinations. But this particular tenant we're trying to accommodate here is more of a destination stop, which can survive in a setback building.
Yeah, I was just looking at the location of the facility in general. All right.
Thank you. Yes.
Any other comments? All right, I think that concludes our public hearing on this matter. Is that correct, Ms. Pappas?
Yes, if no one has, all speakers have spoken.
Okay, any questions of the board? Any comments? Okay, Chair will entertain a motion. And all board members here? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the requested variance.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. You'll have a second?
Second,
And who was the second? Mr.
Hanford.
Davis?
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimous. All right, thank you. We'll give you time to clear the meeting and then we'll move to the next application.
Yes,
Thank you
sir.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next application, the applicant is David Schumer, and I have admitted him into the meeting.
Okay, and do we have anyone joining him either in favor or opposition?
No, sir, and nothing was posted. Mr. Schumer, can you hear us?
I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Okay, this is application 6318. And Mr. Schumer, Margaret, we have not been asking for addresses. Should we not be requesting their address when they introduce themselves?
I would request that they provide their address for the record, and I can obtain the addresses from the other party, the four parties on the previous application.
Okay. Mr. Schumer, will you tell us the nature of your application and why we should consider it?
Well, our application request has been recommended for approval. We have one condition, that is there is a house to the immediate west on just the north half of the property. I don't know if you can pull up the property parcel map. And the house is in very poor condition, and it is owned by the same company that owns all of the red B2 properties at front 90. And the request from the staff was to provide a parking lot screening, because there's a portion of the parking lot that fronts that house. And the owner of the development that is being constructed, that's asking for the variance, has requested to not put in that screen fence for parking, because partially the house is slated to be torn down. It's in very bad condition. It's vacant. And the owner of the property has kind of an understanding handshake agreement with the owner of the Creekside to remove the house. And at some point, I believe they're going to try to get it rezoned and provide an accessory amenity type portion to the Creekside. And he just doesn't want to build a fence and then in a year or so tear it down.
Okay, any questions of the board for the applicant? Okay. And as you stated, the staff recommends approvals with exception of the fence. And you only have a handshake, or they have a handshake agreement as to with holding off on the installation of the fence for the time being. Would this be something that they may consider at a later time?
Is that a question for me or for staff?
For you.
I mean, if somebody were to move into the house, he would be more than willing to put up a fence. He's fairly confident that that is not going to happen, because I'm not sure exactly what the agreement is, whether it's like a first right of refusal or some other kind of agreement. But I think it's that house property and the other weird zigzag looking property he pretty much has interest in purchasing for, you know, I'm not sure exactly what it is. He's talked to me about it regarding the, like maybe a hotel or something for people coming to stay to visit with their family members who are, you know, being treated at the memory care center. It's like a Alzheimer's or dementia patient care for women. And so he's got plans to build on that property in the future. They just don't haven't formalized. He wants, I mean, it's the Creekside facility is essentially ready to go. It just hasn't quite opened yet. But once that gets going, I'm sure that's when they'll move forward with the future phases.
Okay. Once again, any questions of the board for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for David.
Yes.
I think also I saw pictures of the house, the residence, and there was an elevation, I guess, pretty good elevation differential between the memory care facility and the house.
Yeah, along this stretch, there is probably about a 4 or so foot elevation drop right at the property line.
So
this
my
steeper in
question
some cases
was,
to avoid a tree.
yeah, I was just wondering if you put that fence in, is it actually accomplishing anything? Or would you have to put it, you know, a much taller fence in order to get the intended buffering? It looked like to me that maybe the point you were making was that, you know, even if you put a fence in, you're not really accomplishing what maybe the intent of the requirement is.
Yeah, a 3-foot fence is what's required, or 3.5-foot fence is what's required adjacent to parking, and that would not provide that much of a buffer from the elevated side. And the slope kind of acts as a little bit of a buffer because you'll be naturally looking over any parked cars.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions of the board for the applicant? And as Ms. Pappas stated, we have no one in the meeting either in favor or opposition to this application today. And no comments have been submitted otherwise.
Correct.
Okay, I think that'll conclude our hearing on that application. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the application is approved. Unanimous.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just want to clarify, the motion was to approve and it was seconded. Was that as recommended or without the condition requiring the parking buffer?
Mr. Metcalf, you made the motion.
With the recommendation.
Okay.
Hang on one second. This is Jeremy. I second it. So as a point of clarification, Adam, you were recommending for approval requiring the fence?
Yes.
Okay. I've misunderstood that.
I'm sorry. Did you see it?
My thought is that, you know, as a potential, I guess, and I should have spoken this earlier, but maybe as a potential, you said it's about the handshake and kind of the tenuous nature of kind of what's going on next door. You know, my thought was maybe an appropriate recommendation or course of action would be, you know, relief from the fence being required unless that house is, you know, renovated, or is it, if it is, you know, becomes a residence, an occupied residence again, and then the fence would be required.
I tell you what, I can withdraw my motion, and if you would like to take that and make that motion, I'll second that, Jeremy.
Okay. I'll make a motion that they are given, that we approve it, but with relief that the buffering fence is not required unless that house becomes occupied.
Okay, and I have a second.
Second.
All right. Once again, any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, the next two applications, 6280, 6281, both are the Mobile Storm Volleyball Club.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, these are two extensions. The applicant was, and the staff has recommended approval of the extensions. And the applicant is in agreement with that recommendation. So this is for both 6280 and 6281.
Okay, and we do not have anyone in the meeting either in support or opposition today. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and this is a recommendation to approve an extension. Do we have a time frame? 6 months?
6 months by default.
Okay. Any questions of the board for staff? All right. Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Ms. Pappas, do we have to vote a second time for the 6281, or does that cover both?
If it was the intent of the motion and the second, it can cover both. Was that Mr. Golden and Mr. Milling?
Yes.
Mr. Golden?
Yes.
I think we did.
All right, thank you. All right, we're on application 6319, Brett Webb. This is 3721 The Cedars.
Let me
admit him. And anyone concerned?
Okay, Mr. Webb should be in the meeting now.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
All right. For the record, your name and address, please.
Brett Webb, 3721 The Cedars Avenue, Mobile, Alabama, 36608.
Okay, and the nature of your application for this variance, please.
Requesting a variance for a privacy fence within the setback in a residential property.
All right. Margaret, I cannot remember, did the staff recommend approval of this application or not?
Yes, sir, we did. It was subject to a couple of conditions. It was modified, and it was so that the fence was set back 10 feet from the front property line. So it would essentially be in line with the existing fence adjoining via the neighbor. And then, of course, obtaining of necessary permits prior to construction and full compliance with all municipal codes and ordinances.
Okay, Mr. Webb, are you in agreement with those requirements?
I'm fine with those requirements.
Ms. Pappas, you had something else you were going to add?
Just for the record, I have to make sure that all comments that have been received, that I alert to the board to it. We did receive a comment of support via email from Douglas Brown.
Okay, and no comments in opposition?
That is correct.
All right. Any questions of the board for the applicant? Okay, I guess this will conclude our public hearing on the application. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved. Move for approval.
Subject staff recommendations.
Subject to staff recommendations.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, chair voted aye as well. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
give you opportunity, Ms. Pappas, to clear the meeting and bring in our next applicant and any concerned parties.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, our next application is 6320, 6264, which the applicant is the Mitchell Company, and I have admitted Chris Sylvester with the Mitchell Company into the meeting. Before we begin, I do need to let the board know that Mr. James Bly, who is not in attendance, did upload opposition, and you were provided copies of that in the email provided Friday.
Okay, thank you. All right, what was the applicant's name, Mr. Sylvester? On behalf of the Mitchell Company? Mr. Sylvester, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Your name and address for the record, sir.
Okay, it's Christopher Sylvester, 41 West I-65 Service Road North, Suite 300, Mobile, Alabama, 36608.
Okay, and if you will, the nature of your application as the representative.
Yes, we're requesting a lot area and lot width variance of less than 7,200 square feet for a single family lot. We brought this before the board about 8 months ago and got an approval, unanimous approval to basically have one of the 3 lots that we're planning to build these houses on approved. We just could not get it all done logistically in that time frame. But since then, we've gotten all of our plans. We got our demo contract. We're ready to go and make this happen. We just ran out of time.
So Margaret, is this an extension or is this a new approval?
It's a new approval because the prior approval expired.
Okay. All right. Any questions of the board for the applicant? Okay. We only had one individual that was in opposition.
That is correct.
And as you stated, the project was previously approved and has since expired. So we're kind of starting all over again.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Once again, any questions or comments of the board? All right, we'll close the public hearing on this application. Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay, Mr. Golden made a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
And that was Mr. Milling. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion is unanimous and approved.
Okay, this is going to take a few minutes, so.
Yep, thank you.
Hello,
Yes, ma'am.
how you doing?
I'm fine. Are you?
Say it again.
I said,
Give us
how are
a
you?
Give us a few moments and we'll do a sound check for everyone before we proceed.
Yes, ma'am.
Margaret, I'll let you do the sound check.
For the time being, everyone needs to be on mute until we sound check, please.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to essentially call roll. When I call your name, please make sure you can unmute and that we can hear you as well. Ann Baumhauer.
Hi, right here. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Renita Smith.
Yes, ma'am. I'm here also.
Thank you. Elizabeth Rossi.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Jesse McDaniel.
Present.
Laurie, thank you. Laurie Brunson.
I'm here.
Gardner Dale.
Looks like Gardner is still connecting to audio.
Highlight him. Hopefully that'll work out by his turn to speak. And Katie Bratcher. Hold on. Let me look. Oh, hold on. Let me admit her. She was there.
Renita Smith.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I'm here also.
Katie Bratcher.
I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman, all attendees that have signed up are in. We will keep an eye when Demetrius Simeon needs to speak. Hopefully that'll be able to function. Once you call the application.
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, I'm functioning now, I think. I was just on mute. I didn't hear my name called.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, let me read the rules, general procedures, because we have a number of concerned parties for this application. General procedures for this remote meeting are as follows. Staff will admit the applicant and concerned parties associated with an application into the meeting. Once these parties have joined the meeting, the chair will announce the beginning of the public hearing and will reiterate, excuse me, that word gets me every time, the board's following rules. Each application is limited to a maximum of 4 speakers for an application and a maximum of 4 speakers in opposition to an application. Said speakers, regardless of being in support or opposition, are limited to a maximum of 5 minutes with a 1-minute warning provided after a 4-minute period. Once all speakers are heard in support or in opposition, and they're in this order, the applicant is allowed a maximum of 2 minutes to respond. In order to allow the meeting to progress and ensure that the meeting can be heard by all watching and properly recorded, the chair may direct the meeting host to mute the microphone of attendees not addressing the board. The applicant will present their application in conformance with the board's rules as outlined above. The board will ask questions. The opposition will then be allowed to present their concerns in conformance with the board's rules as outlined above. The board will ask questions. The applicant will be provided an opportunity for 2 minutes to respond. Once the board concludes the questions of the applicant and interested parties, the chairman will declare the public hearing closed and the board will go into deliberation session. At this point, all meeting participants, except for the board and staff members speaking for their record, will have their microphones on mute. Once the board has a motion, a second has been rendered and a decision, the applicant and concerned parties will leave the meeting and it will be sent back to the waiting room by the staff. And at that point, then we'll move on to the next application. All right, this is application 6321, Renita Smith, 103 Michael Donald Avenue, and it's a response to an administrative appeal of a staff decision granting reasonable accommodation to allow up to 8 unrelated people to live in a recovery residence as a family. And we'll go with Ms. Smith to start with.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we had them speak, they presented an order of speakers, and actually Ms. Baumhauer will go first, then Ms. Smith, Ms. Rossi, and Mr. McDaniel. However, before they begin speaking, I do need to call out all of the names of people that have submitted comments or emails to the board in support of this appeal. And I have to do this because to be in compliance with the governor's proclamations allowing these remote meetings. So we have received correspondence from the following: Aaron Bowen, Margaret Mangum, Tricia Agee, Michelle Ard, James Thomas Young Jr., Walter Reinhouse, Tricia Agee again, Ann Baumhauer, a speaker, Anna Bush, Matt Conger, Janie Dunlap, Patrick Klump, Jesse McDaniel, also a speaker, Jeffrey Peacock. Then Mr. Reinhouse submitted a letter signed by Gladys Jones, Terry Brackett, and McLean, O'Neill, Shannon Smitherman, Fleming, Baskett, Hafner, McPherson, White, and Ron Fleming. There were 4 names that I could not decipher the signatures. Also, correspondence from Ms. Rossi, also a speaker, Michelle Rogers, Sydney Welch, James Lee, Kenan Phillips, and Sydney Welch again. So at this point, Mr. Chairman, we can begin. And as stated previously, Ms. Baumhauer is to go first.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Margaret, have you or someone in your office tabulated out of the comments how many were for and how many were against?
All of the people that I just read their names are in support of Ms. Smith's appeal. We have another list that are in opposition to the appeal, and I was going to read that before the opposition began speaking. And at that point, I'll have a tabulation for you.
Okay, and also, Mr. Chairman, would you please request of the speakers, as a matter of time to try to be brief and to not repeat what everyone else has said, if you wouldn't mind?
Yes, sir. I think that would be a wise motion.
Yeah, thank you.
What Mr. Metcalf is asking, and this is for both those that are in support of the application of the administrative appeal and all those in opposition, that if a speaker makes a statement that you don't repeat the exact same thing, that you add information that you think that's warranted, that's new and helpful for the board in making their decision. All right. And Ms. Pappas, you said the order, if you will, help us with speakers. And as a speaker comes up for comment, if you'll give your address, name and address, we appreciate it.
Okay. Yes, and Ann Baumhauer is the first speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Should I state my address of my
Please.
house? I live at 1151 Old Shell Road. I am a new resident, very new. I moved in less than 2 months ago. Previously lived across the bay with my family in Fairhope, and I wanted to move closer to where I work. I work downtown. I was really in no hurry to move out, so I've had my eye on Midtown in this area for a little over a year, just looking, and I really do love this area. I think it's beautiful, love all the historic homes, and I do feel like in just the past year, I've seen positive growth, and that is why I decided to purchase. So my recent learning of the granted variance at 103 Michael Donald, it came as a surprise, and it does raise concerns for myself as well as the Old Dolphin Way Association. Susan Thomas, I believe she is on the board of the Old Dolphin Way Association. She has concerns on behalf of the board, which is going to read if that's all right. So the first concern would be the physical limitations of the lot. It is a small lot, little parking spaces available. So it raises the questions, will the 8 residents have cars? How many staff will be on duty at one time and where will they park? Where will auxiliary service providers such as social workers, counselors, educators, where will they park when they come to assist residents? Where will visitors park? How will garbage services be handled? With 8 residents plus staff, will a dumpster be required? And if so, is there room for one to be appropriate located and serviced? The second concern would be the interaction with the neighborhood. Neighbors of this area have long dealt with problems associated with substance abuse, crime, loitering, littering, prostitution. Will such a setting be conducive to the needs of the residents who are dealing with recovery issues? Third concern, the already high concentration of social services in the surrounding community. There are currently several social service agencies, including the Salvation Army, all within a few mile radius of this location. Although the Old Dolphin Way Association members do support the provisions of social services, we question why so many of them end up being located in our neighborhoods. So the fourth concern, the lack of transparency from the sponsoring agency, Door to Serenity. Neighbors of 103 Michael Donald Avenue were blindsided by the news of this approval. The sponsoring agency has made no attempts to reach out to neighbors or to the association. There's little known about their business plan. How is it funded? Where do they obtain their referrals? How long will individuals live in the facility? What will be the staffing ratios? What will be the qualifications of the staff? How will that agency respond to after-hour emergencies? How the staff deal with these issues can greatly influence quality of life for both the residents of the facility and the neighborhood. So these are valid concerns and they should be addressed before further actions taken. Because of these concerns, we respectfully ask that you deny the variance as presented. The Old Dolphin Way Association board would consider a similar proposal for a 3-person residence as is currently allowed under the zoning rules. If the variance cannot be denied at this time, we at least request a carryover of the decision to be made at the time a public meeting can be held where all parties are involved.
Okay,
And that's what I have.
Any questions of the board for Ms. Baumhauer as one of the speakers? Okay. Ms. Pappas? Thank you, Ms. Baumhauer.
Ms. Renita Smith, the applicant, is the next speaker.
All right, thank you.
Hello, how you doing?
Good afternoon, Ms. Smith. Your address, please, for the record.
The address that I own is 100 Michael Donald Avenue, and I am the owner of 103 Michael Donald Avenue.
Okay, and you're questioning the staff's decision, so you've asked for an administrative appeal.
Yes.
You want to tell us why you think that the staff made an error in their decision?
Sure, I would definitely like to elaborate. I didn't write anything out. I just kind of just want to speak on the issue. It's several things. Number one, I kind of want to give you a little background. I purchased the house 100 Michael Donald about 10 years ago. So I am not new to the neighborhood. I've been here, experienced a lot of issues. So I definitely think that the city did not do their due diligence on this neighborhood, because it doesn't take much to come to the neighborhood and see a lot of stuff that we have going on. One of the things, so I'll go back to my background. I purchased the house about 10 years ago, and I had an issue when I came into the neighborhood. And I was actually purchasing this property just for a rental situation. And something made me stay in the neighborhood. And then Carrie Kamenis, she did the neighborhood renewal program. And after me and her spoke, I purchased the property across the street. And I said, okay, I said, it seems like the city is coming in, they're going to make good decisions. They're trying to get rid of all of this. If not, I would not have invested in the neighborhood. So to hear something like this, it concerns me. And going back to coming into the neighborhood and feeling like the neighborhood could expound. I felt the neighborhood could expound. I thought it had a lot of potential. There was a lot of growth in the downtown area. So this street is already compiled with the Oaks. Anybody that's aware of the neighborhood understands that you already have the Oaks there. And I think we probably have about 300 people at any given time coming in and out of there. They dump the trash on the street. I called the city. The city refuses to do anything with that. They refuse to come in the neighborhood and do anything about the drug, the crime, the prostitution. I have just solely come in and actually walked up to people because I can't get any assistance. And I walked up to people and pushed people down the street, pushed them down the street. Nothing else I can ask for. Hey, don't stand in front of my house. Don't stand in front of this lot. Don't stand in front of that. And I'm fighting. And it alarms me that the city continues to put threats into the neighborhood. This is a threat. I've had my house broken into. We have the homeless that just goes up and down the street. You have an AIDS program right down the street. A lot of those people, you know, they have that going on, plus drug situations and things like that. I'm combating, and like I say, not me personally, but combating this. And a lot of these situations that present themselves are not just the people, it is the programs that the city continues to put into the area. Another thing is that I wanted to, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
May I interrupt a second and ask the applicant, what does she mean by the city is putting in here or there? I don't follow that.
Okay.
Margaret,
make sure we don't short her on time.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I paused it.
Okay. If you want to respond to Mr. Metcalf now or at the conclusion, you're welcome.
Oh, it's okay. I think what I mean by that is they execute and agree to the policies, which I feel are egregious, and they lack a person who has done due diligence on the community. A person who's done that would not execute those policies. So another thing is, let me make sure I put this in here too, because this is something that continues to come to my head. Something else I didn't like about the procedure was when I went down there to appeal, they said that you had so many 30 days to appeal. It's $101. You put something like that into this neighborhood, the majority of the people that actually need to appeal that's in that neighborhood, they would have to work possibly 2 full days on most of their salaries to even appeal this decision. I think it's more or less predatory. You know, the city to me is not doing their due diligence when it comes to this, but then they put a high fee. Now for me, no, it is not a high fee because of the money that I make. But for the traditional persons in that area, I feel that you don't give them the opportunity to appeal such a decision. So when you come in areas where it's a blighted community already, I think you should have and excuse those high fees for the people of that neighborhood. Number one, that's what I would say. So this right here, like I said, the thing that you're putting in there is directly bringing down the property values. It's putting us as a direct threat. There's no way that that neighborhood could survive with the things that the city continues to allow. We have already the city, we're in a residential neighborhood. So to add 8 people and to give them more than double, allow those people in there. I don't even see how that is capable. I just can't understand that. Let me see what else did I want to say. Though that's right, expanding on the criteria. So that we already have a criteria in place to protect residential neighborhoods. So to do double that without any assistance, I literally think that you're putting the neighborhood at harm's risk. And one of the things that I read, the 2 things that they allowed the city, when I read through it, one of the things that I noticed was the first thing that it said that it would not put people in harm's way, any threat. And that's one of the things that this does.
Okay. Ms. Smith, we've got to conclude your comment for time unless any of the board members have questions for you. All right, thank you. All right, you have another speaker, Ms. Pappas?
Elizabeth Rossi.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and your address, please.
Yes, I'm Elizabeth Rossi. I'm the property owner and resident at 1157 Old Shell Road.
Okay, and you also are speaking in support of Ms. Smith's administrative appeal. Is that correct?
I am.
Okay, you want to tell us your perspective as it relates?
Absolutely. We purchased our home in 2006. For reference, we're located between Michael Donald Avenue and Hallett Street. The house was derelict, like at least a dozen other houses on the block at the time. We knew it would require a lot of rehab, but we bought it because we loved it. We saw potential in the neighborhood and we wanted to live here. We didn't purchase it to invest and flip as many others have done. Instead, we were excited to invest ourselves personally in recapturing the beauty of a wonderfully diverse neighborhood. And as things improved on Lower Old Shell, numerous stories about the Renaissance were published. It's been amazing to watch that renewal, and we're very proud to have been able to contribute to it. Our sincerest hope, shared by all the neighbors that I know, is that the improvement continues because we love it here. But for that to happen, the thing that we need most is stability. I've not heard anyone state that they don't see the value of the need for treatment facilities such as the one that's proposed. But our neighborhood has reached a saturation point with respect to social services. Within 1 mile of the property in question, there are at least 5 known organizations who provide addiction treatment and counseling. There are an additional 15 organizations, churches, or centers which provide health, food, clothing, or housing services to the homeless, indigent, and transient. Of the 5 addiction facilities, 4 of them, Veterans Recovery Resources, the Salvation Army, Wings of Life, and Alcoholics Anonymous, are actually within 1/2 mile of 103 Michael Donald. Waterfront Rescue Mission is the 5th. Anecdotal evidence suggests there are other groups providing addiction services in our area, but that has been hard to confirm. One of those 4, Veterans Recovery Services, operates a clinic and an office on Spring Hill Avenue near Michael Donald, but they have plans to expand into a full residential addiction treatment campus at that location. This is less than 1 block from 103 Michael Donald. I've met no one who begrudges the existence of these programs or the folks who use them. To the contrary, many of us know, assist, or employ some of these folks and consider them friends. But the fact remains that a high concentration of social services in a neighborhood eventually stretches the ability of that community to manage the problems a transient population brings. There's a certain lawlessness that comes with transiency. It's not my neighborhood, so it doesn't matter what I do there. This breeds problems like trash and petty crime, and the criminal element blends in with the transient population. Almost everyone who lives in the vicinity has had a run-in with these effects. However, sometimes this has also meant felonies and violent crimes. Police are well aware of this reality in our neighborhood. The applicants have requested a reasonable accommodation. We are asking that the city consider what is reasonable from all standpoints, most especially what is reasonable for our community at large. We argue that the establishment of yet another addiction treatment facility in our neighborhood is entirely unreasonable and request a reversal of the earlier decision. We're not a group of neighbors saying we don't want one of these facilities in our neighborhood. We are saying we don't want 6 or possibly even more. It is absolutely unjust to ask our small section of downtown or midtown to manage these circumstances. The city must analyze reasonableness in light of the challenges the neighborhood already faces. Perhaps the city should commit to an analysis of the number and types of services that exist in neighborhoods to ensure they are not concentrated in particular locations due to what may be possible discriminatory perceptions. It very much feels as though our neighborhood has been unfairly targeted. Is this because our neighborhood has a fair share of poor residents? Because the majority of residents on Michael Donald are African American? Because the neighborhood has unfavorable crime statistics despite our pleas for additional policing and the city's promise that the issue would be addressed 12 years ago? We feel that these questions must be asked. Property owners should be able to feel confident that their neighborhoods won't be targeted, and it seems unduly unfair considering that the city invested hundreds of thousands of HUD dollars in this neighborhood through Restore Mobile, which ultimately induced citizens to invest here. Like virtually everyone, I've known my fair share of friends and family who've been afflicted by substance abuse. Whether or not this is a valuable service is not in question. What is in question is whether or not this is reasonable to locate another facility of this type in this neighborhood. And the answer is no. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions of the board for the speaker? Okay, Ms. Pappas, we have a 4th? Or does that conclude the office or the?
We have a 4th in support of the appeal. That's Mr. Jesse McDaniel.
Okay. Sir, if you provide your name and address, please.
Yes, I'm Jesse McDaniel. I live at 1153 Old Shell Road.
Okay.
I appreciate.
Yeah, please proceed.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this today. I want us to remember that what we're talking about here is an increase that was granted by staff to allow Door to Serenity a federal, a reasonable accommodation under federal law, which was cited in the report. And my position is that that staff decision was not consistent with the city's own zoning ordinance. And I'll give the reasons why I think that. Number one, there exists an environment for this project that is not conducive to successful recovery. It's already been stated that drugs and alcohol are easily accessible, that you've got the problem of the Oaks apartments alone is enough to question the logic behind this project. Research shows that when you have a setting like this, it's the exact opposite of what need for successful recovery. And then the logistical problems, the parking situation, there is a no parking sign on the street in front of this property, and the driveway is not adequate for more than probably 4 cars. And the question of where are these people going to park is very legitimate, not to mention the visitors to the building, the employees, and so forth. That's going to contribute to a traffic hazard, and there's a back alley behind the lot which services multiple houses, and so that's going to create a safety hazard coming and going from that back alley. Does the Harbor House project have permission to use that driveway? And if so, what is their plan for trash and garbage collection at the site? Justice is not being done for our neighborhood. The most immediate neighbors on Michael Donald are the ones who brought this appeal to begin with. There's been no outreach to the community by Door of Serenity to educate the neighbors about the variance or why the variance is necessary. One pitiful attempt to pass out flyers on the Saturday before this meeting does not qualify as community engagement. The record includes a staggering number of statements that are in support of Ms. Smith, and a second applicant, Mr. Reinhouse, obtained more than a dozen signatures on his letter of support. And finally, the variance appears to have been granted for a purely economic reason, and please allow me to explain. There is no harm whatsoever in allowing Door to Serenity to establish this program and allow 4 people to participate, 4 non-related residents. That's what the code currently says it is. The population that they're seeking to accommodate can live together just as it is now. It can just be 4. So please note that the organization has not shown that this zoning variance is necessary to accommodate those disabled by addiction. Double the capacity of the residents. There can only be economic reasons for that. If you get into the contract on their website, Door to Serenity is going to charge $300 per week or $700 per month just for housing costs. That's from their website. And the organization wants to double the capacity of the property so they can double the revenue. They accept 8 residents, that's going to be $5,600 a month, maybe more. Think about that for a minute. Somebody's going to be drawing a nice salary from this project. And as it relates to accommodations under the ADA or Americans with Disabilities Act, the law requires equal but not varying preferential treatment. Would this proposal be just slid so unannounced over into Regency Oaks without neighborhood involvement? Or what about Heron Lakes? You know, these places would be better suited for a nice, quiet atmosphere and environment to recover from addiction, not a crime-ridden street in Midtown. You know, our neighborhood is really just seeking justice here today. It's not about being anti-recovery. In fact, you know, we support the idea, just don't double the capacity, especially in a time of a pandemic where we're trying to do more social distancing. And here we are with this variance trying to stack them on top of each other in that house. And I just think that we need to slow this down, delay if possible, or potentially outright approve the appeal by Ms. Smith. Thank you for letting me say my piece.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the board for the speaker?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Davis.
My concern is on this particular speaker. What alley are you referring to, and where does it lead to?
Yes, I have a photograph which is not reflected in your staff report, but I think she's trying to show you with the arrow that it runs behind several lots there on Michael Donald in the back behind the buildings. It's a 1-lane dirt road, basically, for lack of a better term. It's not paved, and it is 1 lane, and it services all of those houses as you can see there.
where does it ultimately lead to? Spring Hill Avenue to the car
I
wash?
believe it terminates at the, you can see there's a residence on about the 5th lot there. It looks as though it terminates at that structure.
For this diagram, can you show me what Spring Hill Avenue, how far it is from this location? I know O'Shell is right there, near. The site is near O'Shell Road, but how far away are we from Spring Hill Avenue? And I believe it's a car wash. And on the next corner down there at Ann Street, there's a service station. I'm concerned about the close proximity there. I'm concerned about the traffic, the pedestrian traffic that's in that area there. And I just need some clarity, Mr. Chairman, on my concerns. The alley has precipitated my highlight.
Mr. Davis, can you see the screen?
I see it. Yes, sir. I see it.
Okay.
I see it. I see it. But okay.
No, I'm just asking. I mean, you asked
Yeah.
a specific question. I want to make sure we were addressing your question.
Yeah.
All right. For the speaker, did you have any comments or questions for the speaker that you haven't already expressed?
Me?
Yes, sir.
I've already expressed it. I'm getting some answers. I don't have them all right now, but I'm getting them.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anyone else on the board have questions for any of the speakers before we go to those that are in opposition? Okay. Ms. Pappas, you have 3 or 4 in opposition to the administrative appeal?
Yes, sir. I will first of all respond to Mr. Metcalf's inquiry from earlier. We had approximately 33 sources of comments in favor of the appeal, be it logged into the portal on the website or else via email. We have 21 that are in opposition to the appeal, submitted via the same method. Again, I do need to read to the board the list of those people that are in support of the appeal. Kevin Loper, Brian Funmeyer, Kobe Bell, Jesse Petit, Reverend Sarah Sills, Kay Hedgepeth, Lynn McDonald, Carrie Searcy, Anna Baston, Katie Bratcher, who will be a speaker, Sandra Dykus, Ida Hardy, Catherine Ferries, Courtney McKnight, Krista Presnell, Rachel Wiley, Angela Rayburn, Jill Rivette, Haley Anderson, and Kevin Dias.
No, Ms. Pappas, these are individuals that were in support of the staff's decision. Is that correct?
Yes, I apologize. That is correct. They are in support of the staff's decision and thus opposed to the appeal.
Okay, and how many of those are speakers today?
We have 4 speakers. On one of them that were listed in the list I just read, only one of them is actually a speaker today.
Okay.
The first speaker we have to present is Laurie Brunson.
Okay, Ms. Brunson, your name and address, please.
Yes, Laurie Brunson. I'm at 211 5th Street in Chickasaw, Alabama.
Okay, and you're in opposition to the administrative appeal. You want to tell us why you feel that way?
Absolutely. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to speak on behalf of Door to Serenity this afternoon. My wife, Lisa Taggart, is the founder of this organization, and I'm honored to be on the board. This ministry started from a place of loss and continues to grow into a ministry of beauty. 4 years ago, Lisa's mom passed away, and 30 days later, her younger sister died of a drug overdose. The night before, Lisa had spoken to Jenny on the phone and encouraged her to seek help. Lisa offered to help get her into Home of Grace. The next morning was supposed to be a time of hope. Instead, Lisa got the call that Jenny was gone. She was only 39 years old. In this unimaginable time of loss, the recovery community did what they do best. They loved Lisa, supported her, and walked with her during the most difficult time of her life. And Lisa celebrated 9 years of sobriety in December. As much devastation as the loss of her sister brought, she didn't have to pick up a drink or a drug to cope with it. That is the gift of recovery. And this horrible time in Lisa's life also gave her a passion to help others. And that is the heart of the beginning of Door to Serenity. Our vision at Door to Serenity is one in which all persons, regardless of their place on the racial, sexual, or gender spectrum, will have equal access to available helping resources on the path to living free from drug and alcohol addiction. The choice of the location on Michael Donald Avenue is an important one to us. I vividly remember being a junior at Davidson High School when this tragic, horrific murder of this young man happened. I remember being absolutely sickened by the senseless act of cowardice. When I've stood in front of the marker placed at this spot on the Dora Finley African American Heritage Trail, I have been struck by the heaviness, the hate, and the heinousness that it reminds me of. But I've also been struck by the love, the light, and the courage that it represents. The courage of a mother who stood up to such a hate-filled organization and said enough. The courage of a community that continues to bring strength from oppression and hope from hopelessness. The importance of this street that's so filled with history. We want to be a part of bringing hope and love here. We want to honor the memory of the young man whose name this street bears. We want to be a positive force in this community. We're not just people who have read books and gone to school to learn how to recover from addiction. We are people that are in active recovery. Lisa has 9 years sober this past December, and I'm coming up on 9 years sobriety in June of this year. We are active in our own recovery. One of the advantages to this site is the close proximity to the AA clubhouse at 1005 Old Shell Road. There are AA meetings there 7 days a week at various times. Our residents will be required to attend meetings at the house as well as at other locations. 1005 Old Shell is within walking distance for those who may not have available transportation. This location is also within walking or biking distance to downtown. This could be a great advantage for those who gain employment at one of the many restaurants and shops in the thriving Mobile downtown community. Based on our board's research and even the decade-old findings of Hazelden, a respected leader in mainstream recovery centers, only 7% of the 854 nationally surveyed programs offered any consciously directed services for LGBTQ populations. The closest facility offering what Door to Serenity will be offering is 332 miles away in Smyrna, Georgia. We have to change that for those in our immediate community and be a beacon of possibility for those who may be outside our immediate area. Recovery services have beneficial impacts on public health and safety budgets and services through reductions in overdoses and fatal accidents. Also, the community at large is helped through increased tax base, resulted from increased employment, decreased homelessness, and reduced dependence on government survival programs. As Stephen Salwich said, help the life of one person and you can help the community. Door to Serenity is committed to operating according to the National Alliance for Recovery Resident standards. These standards include operating with integrity, providing a safe, home-like environment, cultivating the resident sense of community, belonging and responsibility, and being a good neighbor, just to name a few. It's important to remember that a person with substance use disorder is not just an addict. They are someone's mother, father, sister, brother, spouse. Our goal is not only to help them recover, but to put families back together and to help people become productive members of our community. Everyone's family has been touched in some way by addiction. Door to Serenity is most definitely God bringing beauty for ashes. The hurt, pain, confusion, devastation that Lisa experienced in losing her sister planted deep inside her the desire and the passion to help the next Jenny have an option of a safe, secure, structured place to get sober, to help the next Jenny know there is hope, there is a way out, there is a door to serenity. Thank you.
All right. Any questions of the board for Ms. Brunson? Okay, Ms. Pappas, next speaker.
Next speaker is Gardner Dale.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, your address, please.
I live at 303 Dalston Way, Peachtree City, Georgia, 30269. I also own property at 5728 Delrose Drive, Mobile, Alabama, 36609, and 1324 Middle Ring Road, Mobile, Alabama, 36695.
All right.
I
And
just
your,
think on the-
your comments regarding the administrative appeal, sir?
So as I was going through this, right, and we're listening to other people talk, it got me fired up, and I'm a bit nervous talking, so I'm a little off script here, but you know, one of the biggest things as I've started getting into this is the passion of Lori and Lisa and the board to provide such a valuable service to people who are often denied this type of service. It's often not available enough to make a difference in their lives, right? And that's meaningful, and that's something. And I know that Door to Serenity has a vision for the neighborhood and the house and the people that live there. I'm fortunate enough and lucky enough to be able to help in their endeavors. But I just want to mention a couple of things. The Center for Alcohol and Addiction Studies for Brown University said clients who had social networks with a higher number of abstainers and recovering alcoholics had a better outcome 3 years after treatment completion. And what they're trying to do by asking for the reasonable accommodation up to 8 is to increase that network to provide a better chance for these people to succeed, right? Abstinence from alcohol was associated with social support for sobriety and involvement in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is just a short walk away. Expansion of freestanding houses and communities like this, therefore ease the burden on overwhelmed treatment systems. I know that some of the residents or owners there on Michael Donald have expressed concern. For anybody that's unaware, there are only 2 to 3 owner-occupied houses on Michael Donald Avenue. That's it. The rest of them are rentals. Participants during this study conducted, participants across all stakeholder groups that were interviewed generally felt that these types of houses and communities had a positive impact on the residents who lived in them and the surrounding community. This was particularly evident when respondents considered the consequences of ignoring alcohol and drug problems or alternative approaches to dealing with them, such as the criminal justice incarceration. What it did is it raised the property values to this. It lowered crime rates. And I think that everyone on the street who either lives there or owns the property and rents this somewhere else can value that this house just being sold for this purpose was the highest price house sold on that street. And it will command the highest price rent on the street. That also helps improve their values. You know, one of the comments was made that Door to Serenity was not open with their intentions. And I believe it was made by Walter Reinhouse when the first speaker was speaking. And that's not true, because I actually went and viewed Mr. Reinhouse's properties that were adjacent to 103 Michael Donald and to purchase, because he had them for sale. And we expressed exactly what we were doing there at 103 with the possibility of trying to expand into 105 and 107. And so we were very forthcoming with him on what our plans were and how we were going to approach it. So I think that that is an unfair statement.
1 minute.
Okay. Mr. Dale, any further comments?
No, that's it.
All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Oh, I do have one. I do have one other thing. The need for 8 people does help make this a viable, a financially viable endeavor. I think that we understand that these residents need resources that Door to Serenity will be providing, and the additional capacity will allow for additional services and additional items to be provided to help in their recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Metcalf, you had a question?
I have a question for this gentleman.
Yes, sir.
If you stated it, I apologize, but what is your interest in this matter?
I will be the owner of 103 Michael Donald.
Okay. My apologies. Okay.
No, you're good. You know what? I left that out of my addresses that I mentioned because I'm currently not closed on the house yet.
Okay, so this house is under contract by you to
Yes,
be
sir.
for this very reason.
For this very reason, yes, sir.
How did you come about quickly? How did you come about this, doing this and such?
So I've known Lori for a while, as she helps me with some real estate kind of purchases around Mobile as well. And we got to talking about it, and she said this is one of the things that we're very passionate about. And
okay. So okay, so just for clarity,
Yes, sir.
you would be the property owner, not the business operator, and Lori would be actually running this program.
Lori, you want to speak to who runs the program specifically?
Door to Serenity will be running the program. I'm on the board of Door to Serenity. Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is a board, a group that wants to do this, but the one that's going to buy the building is the guy from Georgia.
Yes, sir.
The owner would be Mr. Dale, and we already have a signed lease agreement with him to rent the property from him.
Well, okay, if he doesn't own it, that doesn't mean anything, but I was just trying to get, because it's a bit complicated, and I was just trying, for my benefit and everyone else's, about the players here, so thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of the board for Mr. Dale? Okay, Ms. Pappas, we got a third individual to speak?
Yes, the third speaker is Demetrius Simeon.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir. Your address and name again for the record?
Yes, my name is Dr. Demetrius Simeon. I live on 11 Common Street, right behind the Salvation Army.
Okay, and you're in opposition to the administrative appeal. You want to tell us why you feel that this staff decision was accurate?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that need to be considered here. I'm a sociologist and criminologist by trade, so please forgive me if I repeat just a little bit what's already been stated. I think, of course, we have to respect the history and the tragedy that led to the naming of the street in the first place, Michael Donald. I think that the concerns about the children and youth and the women and the elderly in the area in that community are prevalent. I mean, at the same time, it's a community filled with people trying to make a way, which is my background. I'm, originally from Oakland, low income, same kind of area. We are faced in that area as one of the city's biggest hotspots for crime and prostitution and drugs has already been brought up. And any endeavor that would allow for positivity to be created and brought up in that area, I think is definitely needs to be considered and supported to counteract some of the other systemic issues that are poverty and racism that have led to that area being as it is. I think that there are risks involved with individuals in recovery in the area, and that's understood, but the proximity to Wings of Life and to other Salvation Army and to AA on Old Shell Road, and people like myself, I've got over 10 years of recovery who are going to invest as volunteers, and other people who are within walking distance to this resident and deal with people who are in recovery in that area already to support and strengthen that area, I think is going to happen for the individuals in the house, as well as for the community players and neighborhood people that are under siege at times in that area from the criminal element. I think that understanding that it's not just an individual process, 4 people in that area, the 8 people just doubling in itself, the connections, the networks, the family members, the people who will come and go and visit. And we don't mind parking, a couple of miles away if we need to walk over to help and support and strengthen that community as well as that house of people. I think that most of the sites that are for treatment in this area and in the country are mainly for men. And so any site that would allow for more women to be served, let alone LGBTQ plus individuals to be served, definitely needs to be looked at and considered, because this is a population that's marginalized even among service centers. And so there's definitely going to be on-site case management. I've got a background in pastoral care counseling and addiction. I've already offered, as other people have offered their services to help support this area, just like we support. I live right behind Salvation Army, just like we support them. There's people in recovery. We walk and park and you know, are in that area all the time in terms of Old Shell Road, and making sure that the whole entire neighborhood, my neighborhood, frankly, is better because of what we can provide. Is people, this will decrease the crime. This will decrease this will increase employment. This will decrease the fracturing of the families and the community as a whole. All of that will increase the property values of those who own in the area and those who live in the area. It's just renters trying to deal with more public safety and criminal elements decreasing because of the positivity. People tend to get scarce when there's positive elements around that will report on them for their criminal behavior, frankly. So I think that needs to be considered. I think that this front porch community and I've gone there because I've had a couple of sponsees in the program who've lived on the street, and I've tried to help. Who have been there, and I've tried to help them struggle. One person in that area has struggled a lot, you know, whereas we put 8 people who are supported by the community at large there, and by professionals like myself there. I think that you will find that the whole entire neighborhood will profit, and including the owners of the homes will profit in a very positive way. I think that it's important. We talk about broken windows. I think that any endeavor that's there to restore and repair broken windows, which is what this endeavor would do, will allow for a better society to be created. This is just one example of that, and I definitely think it needs to be supported.
All right, thank you. Any questions of the board for the speaker?
Chairman, I have a question.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if this is a question that's most appropriate for this speaker, but I guess, but maybe for somebody in the opposition. When I was reading the application, one of the things that struck me, it was just, I guess, counterintuitive, is that a program like this, who is trying to help people with addictions, put them in an area that seems to be, rife with,
yes,
drug and alcohol issues, crime. It just seems completely counterintuitive to me. What's the rationale for this location versus other locations that might not be in such a tough area?
Yeah.
It seems like to me that you would be looking more towards an area that maybe does not have these issues.
Yeah,
Can you talk to that a little bit?
I think they have, but I'm going to go ahead and add my voice if you don't mind. I think it's important to understand that some of the quote unquote better areas are more in resistance to a service like this. I don't think it's by mistake that the service centers, the treatment centers, the AA meetings are all concentrated in this particular area. I think that this area has proven itself long term to be able to be sustainable. First of all, I think the waterfront mission, which is miles away from the area, shouldn't even be considered in the list, but that's a whole other thing. The fact of the matter is, most of these people are poor, who are going to be helped by this program. I suspect most of them are not going to have the same kind of resources in terms of family and transportation. So being able to be close to their employment and being able to be helped by people like myself who can give them free or low cost counseling puts them in an arena that will strengthen them so that they can then strengthen the neighborhood. There's why would you put it in an area like this? Because it's more receptive over time than other areas have been. And we don't have this particular population, women and LGBTQ plus individuals, to the extent that this would add another inroad for those particular group among the other people who would support them in recovery who are already there, I think needs to be considered.
Okay, Mr. Millen? Any further questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, any other questions of the board? Okay, Ms. Pappas, we have another speaker. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. The last speaker is Katie Bratcher.
Okay, Ms. Bratcher, your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Your audio is a little difficult. Ms. Pappas, can you hear?
I can come in on my phone if you'll give me just a second.
There, we can hear you now.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Sophie, call second floor. Sophie, call second floor, please.
I'm at work. I'm a registered nurse. My name is Katie Bratcher. I live at 1167 Old Shell Road. In reference, that sits directly in front of Michael Donald Boulevard. I bought my home in 2008. I am a single female who owns my home, and I'm also a member of the LGBT community, and I am a sober person. I have a written statement that I'll read. And this says, Door to Serenity is a nonprofit organization that was founded by Lisa Taggart and Lori Brunson. It is the hope and mission to provide specifically LGBTQ++ individuals a sober living environment in order to allow the opportunity to rebuild their lives and become productive and contributing members of society once again. They have formed a board of directors that includes several members of the Mobile area community. Through much hard work and a dedication, are attempting to open their first sober living home at the above listed address. The founders I have known for a little over a year, and in that time have become very close friends and family to me. Lisa and Lori both know the struggle of becoming sober and of losing loved ones due to the disease of addiction. They are firm believers in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and strive to live the principles of said program in their daily lives, and plan to have the structure of this sober living home follow these principles as well. Along with being contributing and productive members of the Mobile area community, they have also assisted a plethora of individuals over the course of almost 10 years, 9 to be exact, in achieving their own sobriety, thus connecting them back with themselves, their family and friends, and the wonderful community of Mobile. I know firsthand myself the honesty, hope, action, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, love, discipline, perseverance, spiritual awareness, and service that these two live on a daily basis in all aspects of their lives. I myself am a sober person, due in majority to the principles that I've learned in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. These principles were taught to me in large part by my sponsor and mentor, Lisa Taggart. Her wife, Lori Brunson, has also been a very influential part of my recovery as well. They have taught me through their own lives how to walk with grace, and to remain sober for almost 2 years. Also, I know what it's like to lose a loved one. Ooh, excuse me. I know what it's like to lose a loved one due to the disease of addiction. My old sister, like Lisa Taggart's sister, died due to her addiction. My loving sister was...
It's okay. It's okay. Keep going.
My loving sister was many things. She was love first and foremost. She was also a mother and wife, daughter, sister, friend, nurse, funny, loving, kind, bisexual woman. She spent time in 2 separate sober living homes. However, due to their affiliation with certain religious organizations, was asked to leave the facility due to her sexual orientation.
1 minute.
This is a very common occurrence with sober living homes in this area as well. Most, if not all, the homes in the facilities in the Mobile area are faith-based and do not allow openly LGBTQ individuals to achieve sobriety in their facilities due to their sexual orientation. Door to Serenity is the first of its kind in this area and is much needed. Lastly, as a homeowner and neighbor to the above listed address, I am excited and hopeful for the positive influence that Door to Serenity's efforts will bring to my neighborhood. As I write this recommendation, I am sitting on my front porch looking down Michael Donald Boulevard. I could only hope that the positive influence that this would bring would help the condition of many of my own neighbors. Lastly, outside of this written statement, I sit on my front porch and I can look all the way down Michael Donald Boulevard and I see the drug deals and the prostitution. I see the kids that come and destroy people's properties. I have had my own property broken into and had thousands of dollars worth of equipment. I also own a small business and I had thousands of dollars of my own equipment stolen, which I never was able to receive back from the city, even though it was gotten back because they arrested the guy. And I know for a fact that the influence that this home would bring would only bring positivity. I know that the AA center is the Old Shell House is right down the road. I walk to that house myself for meetings.
I hate to, I don't want to be rude, but we've got to conclude because your time's expired. I appreciate it. Ms. Pappas?
Yes.
Before we move on with a response from, I guess it would be Ms. Smith, Mr. Rossler provided a review for the board regarding the staff's decision.
Yes.
He's on for the meeting.
Yes, he is.
Do we have time for him to provide just a kind of a brief summary?
Can you hear me?
Mr. Rossler?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. As you saw from the letter that I wrote to you explaining the basis for the staff decision, this case kind of is at the intersection of sociology, land use, and fair housing requirements, what the law requires. The first couple pages, I set forth a very general summary of what sober living houses are and what their philosophy is. I drew that from a lot of different sources, court cases, articles that I found in legal periodicals, and in fair housing regulations, because that's important to understand how the Fair Housing Act interrelates here. And there are certainly people on this conference call that can explain this a lot better than I can, probably Dr. Simeon, a whole lot better than me. But the fundamental basis for these sober living houses is that it serves recovering alcoholics or drug addicts. And the operative word there is recovering, because I believe that under the National Alliance of Recovery Residents guidelines that Ms. Brunson mentioned, if you're not recovering anymore, if you go back to actively using drugs or alcohol, then you no longer are considered handicapped or disabled. You no longer qualify to live in that residence. But what the basis for this is that these residents come together and live as a family unit. They have housekeeping responsibilities. They shop, they cook, they do the yard work. And that is all part of their recovery plan to require these residents to live within a stable environment and accept the responsibility of a family unit. And it's for that reason that, as I explained on the third page of the letter, that the Fair Housing Act and the courts have said that you have to treat these family residences as these recovery residences as a functional family. Now, that's a concept that I think is foreign to a lot of people. It certainly was to me until about a year or so ago when we first got involved with the concept of recovery residences here in Mobile. So the bottom line is you have to treat this location, the Door to Serenity, as a family, and they are required to follow the same rules for a single family residence. For example, one speaker talked about parking, talked about dumpsters. Well, this residence would have to comply with all the parking requirements for single family residences. If there's no parking signs out front, they have to abide by that. Their trash will be picked up just like any other single family residence. What I heard, I don't want to argue the case here, but what I heard is a lot of talk about drugs and what the transiency in this area. The residents of Door to Serenity coming together as a functional family are going to face the same challenges that would be faced by a husband and wife moving into this residence with 4 or 5 kids.
Hey, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I, Jim, can I interject a second and ask you a question? And Doug, this may be for you too. I'm hearing a bunch of well-meaning, emotional, sociological stuff, which for these purposes here, I don't really care. This is a business decision. I mean, this is a decision and an application for for administrative appeal, and I don't want it to get muddied up by all the other stuff. So let me just try to bring it down. My question to you is, it sounds like that the decision of the staff was basically determined by them to be in compliance with federal laws, and that whether they agreed with it or not, they didn't have a choice. So my question is should we even be hearing this anyway? And if we were to agree with the appeal, basically denying these people's ability to do this project, are we in violation of federal law, and can we even do that?
Mr. Metcalf, this is Jim Rossler. I will agree with you that the staff decision was in complete compliance with what federal law dictates, with the procedures that federal law dictates and the procedures that the city's policy requires.
Right.
And yes, well, you know, I'll also say this.
Mr. Rossler?
Everybody sues over everything nowadays, but the city would certainly be susceptible to being sued if the application were denied.
All right, Mr. Rossler, Mr. Metcalf, I understand your point. Let me ask Mr. Rossler one additional question.
Please.
We know that you and the staff know that there's a recent Supreme Court ruling, I believe, that confirms your opinion on this matter. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we already know that it's already went to the Supreme Court and has been upheld that this is the correct manner in which to handle this situation.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Okay.
All right, let's go.
All right. Any other questions of the board for Mr. Rossler or Mr. Anderson? All right, we owe the applicant a 2-minute opportunity for rebuttal. Is it Ms. Smith that we have to offer the time, or is it another individual, Ms. Pappas?
Ms. Smith is the applicant and she can make the rebuttal.
Okay, Ms. Smith, are you still with us on the?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. If you will, you've heard the opposition to your appeal and the Mr. Rossler and Mr. Anderson's opinion regarding the legal ramifications should staff have denied the application. Will you give us your 2-minute rebuttal?
Yes, sir. So I think I'd like to try to stay focused on the law end of it. That was one of the first things that pertaining to my appeal. For number one, we're in a residential area, so it's no more than 4 family members. So even if they were the appeal, that the law that they quoted, it doesn't make sure I say this right. The law that they quoted, it pertains to the 4 individuals as a family. The thing that I'm appealing is to double that. That's the law by no means gives the city an allowance of 2 times the allotted amount for a residential neighborhood. That is the problem that I have with this. This law also says that the only way that this law cannot be put in is if it allows for property damages and for threats. So personal property and things such as of that nature. So that is part of the appeal that I submitted, and I submitted evidence as I read through it to go with that. So that was my problem. So it definitely gives them the right for each person, and it also says that for each person to try to mitigate the damages, which is assessed on an individual basis. So without us having actual individuals on the table, then that we already, there's no way to be able to do that. And then for the city to go and to give us double that, I don't believe that they have the ability to do that. I do think they need to stay within normal standards, which is 4. And then also with 4, I think that would give us an opportunity to see how that works. Now, when you did that on a trial basis, allowing 4 people, and then if that worked out, then the next year get with the community and say, hey, this worked out, we need to double this, then I can understand even making that reasonable accommodation. But having that with nobody on the thing, that law stipulates completely, both laws, they stipulate that it does not include where there will be a threat. And one of the things that we have to understand is the lady that was speaking, I've had people in my family also that's been on drugs. That is a battle in itself. They are on and off. There's not a high number of people that stay off of drugs. These people are going to be right across the street from me. That I would not feel safe. Even with some of the programs that's in the community right now, I don't feel safe. I'm always trying to abate a lot of the nuisances that are in the area. We don't really have city support. So I'm not requesting that the city come in and tell these people that they can't open a drug rehab center. I'm only saying don't double it in a residential neighborhood. Stick with what residential code stipulates.
All right, thank you.
And that is what I have to say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Mathis, there's any other? All right.
I have a question.
Excuse me, Margaret, can you tell us who's asking the question?
This is Jeremy. I've got a question if it's appropriate time.
Yes. Who's your question directed to, Mr. Milling?
I think Margaret, but I don't know if Jim or Doug need to weigh in. My question, kind of the whole time and in reading this, is how the decision was arrived at that doubling the size of this facility was still appropriate and in, I guess, aligned with the current law. That to me seems like that is a stretch. And so, what was the rationale behind that?
Jim, can you take that?
I was gonna see if you could take that.
Mr.
Hold on, please, let them respond.
I know, but I want to add on to Jeremy so he wouldn't have to answer twice. Okay, whatever.
Please.
And Jeremy, you may have been thinking this too, but I think where Jeremy is going is in the law when it says reasonable accommodations. When it says reasonable, but does that give wiggle room? So go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Metcalf.
The
or Jim?
This is Jim. The answer goes back to the definition of family in our zoning ordinance. Family is one or more persons operating as a single housekeeping unit with one limitation. You can't have more than 4 lodgers or boarders. Under the Fair Housing Act, recovery residences have to be treated as a single family unit. Now, there's no limitation in our zoning laws as to how many residents you can have in your single family residence. You could have a mother, father, and 5 kids, totaling 7. You could have a mother, father, and 6 kids, totaling 8. In fact, I've got family right down the street that's got 5 kids with a mother and father. So that's how you arrive at that. The reasonable accommodation is to accommodate the number of residents by removing that limitation on the number of people who are not related to each other. If that makes sense, if I answered your question.
You did me.
Mr. Melly?
Yeah, it does. I don't know that I agree with, the logic. I mean, I understand the logic behind it. It just seems like to me that it puts a burden on the neighborhood that's, completely outside of their control. And that to me is very concerning. But from what I hear legally, it doesn't sound like we have much of a choice in this decision unless the city wants to end up in a lawsuit. And that's just a very frustrating situation.
Okay, any other comments or questions of the board?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Davis.
I'm in agreement with Mr. Metcalf and Mr. Millings. It sort of ties our hand in that I'm not really sure if we should be dealing with this because of the fact that our hands are tied. But in as much as it's brought before me, then I'm willing to deal with this head on. But I think this is very unfair to the neighborhood. I'm familiar with O'Shea Road and what the owners are trying to do there. I'm familiar with how far it has come. I'm familiar with the AA house that's down on O'Shea Road, and familiar with the Salvation Army, the Wings of Life, and all of these other places that are not permanent residents. My concern is that traffic that's generated in that area there and how it is not being dealt with. I'm concerned. But I'm not really sure, council, if we are in a position to do the city any good by whatever decision we make here today. But I'm very concerned about the neighborhood.
Okay, Mr. Davis, thank you. Any other comments of the board? Okay, this concludes our public hearing on this application, or excuse me, administrative appeal. And Ms. Pappas has read the names of the individuals in support and those in opposition. So we have that for a matter of record. And we've heard the legal interpretation for Mr. Rossler and Mr. Anderson. I'll entertain a motion either to uphold the appeal or to deny the appeal.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I find myself in an unusual position here because I am firmly against this as a, well, also in many ways, but as a resident of very close to that area. But what I think is I think that the city and we have been hamstrung by some liberal agenda passed down by the federal government that unfortunately we can't say anything about. So given that, with great reluctance, I move that we deny the appeal.
Okay, I have a motion to deny the appeal. Do I have a second? Okay, chair makes a second to deny the appeal. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the denial, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, Mr. Golden was the opposed.
I'm opposing it too.
Okay, well, then that means the motion fails. Because we need.
Well, that's the same thing.
We have to have 5 to affirm a motion. We have 2 to deny, and that leaves 4 to support your motion. Ms. Pappas?
I think Mr. Anderson needs to weigh in, but in lack of a
Unanimous decision.
well, it doesn't have to be unanimous.
We have to have 5 to affirm a motion.
Have to have 5 to affirm. But if you do not have, 5 to grant, I believe the appeal is denied due to a lack of 5 people voting to support it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Which is the same effect.
It's the same result. The appeal is denied due to a lack of 5 affirmative votes.
Correct. So the same effect. Yeah. All right. Any further on this one? All right. We'll give you time to clear the.
Mr. Chairman, let me make sure I got the vote though correct. We had Mr. Metcalf and yourself to grant the appeal.
No, to deny.
Deny the appeal. I apologize.
And Jeremy.
And Jeremy voted, Mr. Milling voted with you. Then go ahead.
Mr. Burris, did you vote to deny the appeal or did you support it? Mr. Burris, are you still with us?
Hold on. Let me see if I can unmute him if he's muted. Here he is. Give me a moment. So sorry.
Because Mr. Davis voted to approve the appeal, and Mr. Milling, or was it Mr. Golden?
Golden.
Mr. Golden. Okay.
Mr. Burrows, can you? How did you vote?
I voted with Mr. Metcalf.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Margaret, do you have your count?
Yes, sir. The appeal is denied due to the lack of 5 affirmative votes.
Correct.
Margaret, this is Doug. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Jim, do we need now a motion to uphold the appeal to make the record proper, or is the denial of Adam's motion sufficient?
Board of Adjustment rules require 5 affirmative votes. I would lack of 5 affirmative votes would be adequate.
Okay, good enough. Thank you. I'm good.
I would be very encouraged if Mr. Rossler chimed in.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, I certainly would like Jim's input, but I hear what you're saying, Margaret, and that I believe that would be correct.
Okay. All right. Margaret, if you'll clear the
I will clear the meeting.
And then we've got 3 more applications, 2 that are requested for holdover. And the last one ought to be a fairly simple one. So as soon as, you have no individuals that are in the waiting area to speak on these, correct?
On the next two, no, I do not. However, we do have the last one.
Right. Okay, well, we'll get to that shortly. All right, could I go ahead and start for the sake of time?
I wish you'd wait. I'm sorry. This is a little tedious. And I apologize for the time it is taking. Okay.
It probably would have taken this long if it would have been in a different form.
Okay, I'm ready. I apologize.
Okay, we got application 6322 is 206 Carmel Drive East.
Yes, sir.
And we've got a request for a holdover.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any questions of the board for the staff regarding that one? All right, Chair entertain a motion for a holdover.
Move for a holdover.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Application 6323, 900 St. Anthony Street. This one is also requested for holdover. Any questions of the board for the staff? Okay, Chair, entertain a motion.
So move.
I have a motion to hold over. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Okay, anyone opposed? Motion carries. Last application is 6324. John G. Walton Construction Inc., in City of Mobile. This is regarding Baltimore Street and pretty much to use this particular property for an office trailer and laydown area and to waive all the requirements associated with it otherwise. Do we have a applicant representative, Ms. Pipus?
Yes, you should have.
But it doesn't go very much.
Okay, I have just moved into
It wouldn't cut it, just ain't go very much.
Mr. Davis, we're hearing you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I just muted. All right, I have moved into the meeting now. Johnny Walton, Nick Amberger with the city, and Amy Williams with the city. Let me make sure, let me unmute them.
Okay, now do we have anyone in opposition to this application?
No, sir, we received no opposition regarding this application.
And do we have any correspondence to the city regarding this one?
No, sir.
Okay, this ought to be fairly straightforward then. All right, Mr. Walton, I understand you're on the meeting to propose this application. Your name and address, sir?
I'm John G. Walton. My address is 23 Edgefield Road. And Mobile, and my office address is 1806 Wolf Ridge Road in Mobile.
Okay, Ms. Pappas, was this application recommended for approval?
Yes, it was. Yes, it's recommended approval subject to several conditions, which were provided to Mr. Walton via email.
Okay, Mr. Walton, are you in agreement with the staff's recommendations?
Yes, it's recommended approval subject to several conditions, which were provided to Mr. Walton via email.
And Mr. Walton, are you in agreement with the staff's recommendations?
Yes, it's recommended approval subject to several conditions.
Margaret, we got something going on with the video, or I mean audio.
Yeah, I just realized that. Not exactly sure what to do.
Well, I think you addressed it.
Well, what I did is I quit sharing my screen.
I mean audio. I think you addressed it.
Well, what I did is I quit sharing my screen. I think we've tested the limits of our technology.
All right, let's try one more time and nobody speak. Mr. Walton, are you in agreement with staff's recommendation?
We've tested the limits of our technology.
All right, let's try one more time. Nobody speak. Mr. Walton, are you in agreement with staff's recommendation?
The recommendations.
Okay, I just muted everyone. Mr. Chairman, I've unmuted you. I'm going to unmute Mr. Walton and see if he's able to respond.
Thank you.
Mr. Walton, can you hear us? Everyone.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, I've unmuted you. I'm going to unmute Mr. Walton and see if he's able to respond. Mr. Walton, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Mr. Chairman, I've unmuted you. I'm
Okay.
going to unmute Mr. Walton and see if he's able to respond. Mr. Walton, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Just got a message. Is somebody watching this on live stream? If so, please turn it off. Thank you, Amy. Okay, let's try this one more time. Mr. Walton,
Yes.
are you in agreement with the recommendations?
I'm not sure I've seen the recommendations.
I emailed them to you Friday, but I will read them to you.
Okay.
Approval is valid for an initial period of 1 year with extensions required if additional time is needed. Hours of operation are limited to between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. Within 60 days of completion of the associated project, the site will be returned to its current status to include removal of the project trailer, removal of all gravel or other surfacing materials used, removal of any chain link fence, and placing of sod. Revision of the site plan to indicate what surfacing material will be used for the laydown yard. Revision of the site plan to illustrate a compliant residential buffer abutting residential properties. Revision of the site plan to comply with accessible parking areas and associated surfacing as appropriate if required, subject to the city engineering comments, which require a Tier 2 land disturbance permit and prohibition of aggregate within the public right-of-way and a corresponding right-of-way permit, subject to urban forestry comments, which include removal of heritage trees will require a tree removal permit, subject to the fire department requirements, just compliance with the 2012 International Fire Code, submission to and approval by Planning and Zoning, 2 copies of the site plan required for any land disturbance permits. And I apologize, that's a lot.
The only question I have is the project's going to be a 2-year project. It's going to go beyond 1 year. And as far as some of these, like the fire codes, things like that, I'm not familiar with what we'll have to do. We'll get all appropriate permits, but as to some of these things we'll have to abide by, we will abide by everything we have to, unless it's something beyond the scope of putting a trailer there with a parking lot, you know. And, so that's all really we're asking you for. And as far as returning the property to its original use, we will do that. You know, we'll remove the trailer, we'll remove the fencing, we'll remove the aggregate parking, and then we'll seed and grass the property and bring it back to its original use.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and Mr. Walton, just to kind of hopefully reiterate what you've said, all of the requirements in general are required and would be to place the trailer, the office trailer there, the limitation on hours of operation. If all of that is agreeable, then it sounds as if the only real request you would have regarding these recommended conditions is that the approval be granted for 2 years to cover the duration of the project. Is that a bad assumption?
Yeah, and there's a possibility we could get through it in a shorter time frame than 2 years. We hope so. And we would only do it for the duration of the project.
Okay. 2
Johnny,
years,
we would like you to get quicker. We would like you to get through quicker than 2 years.
Yeah, we would too, for sure.
okay, so you're in agreement with staff's recommendation and you're requesting that the approval be for a 2-year period to give you adequate time so that Nick doesn't have to come find you?
Well, he'll be finding us every week at our staff meetings.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me add in. This is kind of a new requirement for us. We've typically not had construction trailers on our projects. Typically, what's happened in the past was our contractor had to go work with a property owner and maybe or maybe not find a laydown yard. We've got a new executive director that has requested very strongly that we have these construction trailers on site, which there's a benefit to them on a project that's this big, and then also a place to lay down material. Johnny will have lots of materials because this project is rebuilding the water, the sewer, the storm drain system, and then everything else above ground. So there will be a need to lay down and stockpile materials so that they are readily available when they're actually being laid. Under some other circumstances, maybe the city would have acquired the property and we would have had it ourselves. That's just not. This project had already come out of the gate well before this was going to be required. So Johnny did search out property owners or property that was available, had a willing property owner to work with him. And we believe that this will help expedite the execution of the project there. And it'll help clean up an area, a little extra area there that's got a little bit of blight to it in itself. The land in question is, while it's not real bad, it is a little grown up. It's kind of been a dumping ground for some of the community. So I think when they get done project, it will be it'll be good for the community as well.
Okay. Any questions of the board for the applicant or any of the staff? All right, that concludes our public hearing on this. It's recommended for approval subject to staff conditions. The applicant's willing to abide by those. Chair, entertain a motion to approve.
Move for approval with the exception of the extension. The approvals for 2 years.
I have a motion to approve with a 2-year limit. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Thank you all for such a briefly experience. And Margaret for coordinating the.
Thank you.
Great job, Margaret. Great job.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other business before we conclude?
No, sir.
All right, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. Everyone have a good day. Thank you.
See you, Bill.